Why did France, a founding member of NATO, walk away at the mid of the Cold War? And why does it still dream of a European army, independent from the USA? The French relationship with NATO is one of the most unusual in modern history, a story of pride, independence, and a constant struggle between unity and sovereignty. The birth of NATO and France's early role. When NATO was created in 1949, France stood at the heart of the alliance. The wounds of World War II were fresh, the Soviet Union was expanding its effect, and Western Europe needed American protection. NATO promised collective defense. An attack on one member would be considered an attack on all. For France, devastated by German occupation just a few years earlier, NATO was both a shield and a reassurance. American troops, bases, and nuclear guarantees seemed essential. France even hosted NATO's headquarters in Paris until 1966. But even from the beginning, there was tension. Could France rely too heavily on the US? Could a proud European nation allow itself to be militarily dependent on Washington? De Gaulle's revolt, 1966. The turning point came with President Charles de Gaulle. In 1966, de Gaulle shocked the world. He announced that France was withdrawing from NATO's integrated military command and ordered all foreign troops and NATO headquarters to leave French soil. Why such a drastic move? De Gaulle believed NATO had become an instrument of American dominance. Washington decided the strategy, Washington controlled the nuclear weapons, and Washington dictated the terms of European security. France, he argued, was reduced to a junior partner. De Gaulle wanted strategic autonomy. France would control its own defense, its own nuclear force, and its own destiny. He famously asked, "Will the United States risk New York to save Paris?" In his eyes, France needed to be able to defend itself, even against a Soviet nuclear threat, without depending on American approval. The move was dramatic but symbolic. France did not leave NATO entirely. It remained a political member of the alliance but stayed out of the military chain of command for over 4 decades. However, NATO is a military alliance rather than political union. The French nuclear force and independent defense. Central to de Gaulle's vision was the force de frappe, France's independent nuclear arsenal. By the 1960s, France had developed its own nuclear weapons, submarines, and delivery systems. To de Gaulle, this nuclear independence was the cornerstone of sovereignty. France would never again be occupied or humiliated, as it was in 1940. By refusing U.S. control, France sent a clear message: its survival would never depend on Washington's goodwill. This independent policy extended beyond nuclear weapons. France built its own defense industry, produced its own fighter jets, and promoted its own arms exports. It wanted freedom of action, the ability to intervene in Africa, the Middle East, or anywhere else without needing NATO approval. But there was a cost. Many allies saw France as unreliable, a partner who wanted the benefits of NATO's protection without sharing all the responsibilities. Europe's dream of an independent army. De Gaulle's stance created a deeper question: should Europe always depend on the US for defense? France has consistently been the strongest advocate of a European defense identity. As early as the 1950s, French leaders proposed a European defense community. The idea failed then, but it never disappeared. In the 1990s, France pushed for the European security and defense policy. And in recent years, President Emmanuel Macron has revived the idea of a European army. He warned that Europe cannot rely forever on the USA, particularly after moments of transatlantic tension, whether during the Iraq War, Trump's skepticism of NATO, or the US pivot to Asia. For France, the EU should not just be an economic union, but a military power capable of defending Europe's borders, intervening abroad, and even deterring threats without waiting for US leadership. This vision is not universally accepted. Eastern European states, especially Poland and the Baltic countries, fear that weakening NATO could leave them exposed to Russia. For them, the US is the ultimate guarantor of security. But France continues to argue that Europe's long-term safety requires strategic autonomy. The long road back to NATO. Despite de Gaulle's withdrawal, France never fully abandoned NATO cooperation. French officers participated in joint missions, and French troops often fought alongside NATO allies in places like Bosnia, Kosovo, and Afghanistan. By the 1990s, the Cold War was over, and France saw advantages in closer coordination. In 1995, under President Jacques Chirac, France rejoined NATO's military committee. The process of reintegration accelerated under Nicolas Sarkozy, who in 2009 announced France's full return to NATO's integrated military command after 43 years of absence. Why return after so long? Sarkozy argued that by rejoining, France could shape NATO from within. It could influence decisions, win leadership roles, and strengthen its global clout without sacrificing independence. Still, the return was controversial inside France. Critics saw it as abandoning de Gaulle's legacy of independence. Supporters argued it was a pragmatic move for a world where security threats, terrorism, cyber attacks, instability in Africa demanded cooperation. France and NATO today. Today, France plays a paradoxical role in NATO. On one hand, it is fully inside. French troops participate in NATO missions in Eastern Europe, France contributes to nuclear planning, and French generals hold key NATO posts. On the other hand, France continues to question NATO's reliance on U.S. leadership. President Macron has been blunt. In 2019, he declared that NATO was experiencing brain death, pointing to a lack of coordination and overdependence on Washington. He insisted Europe must build its own defense capacity, independent of U.S. politics. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 reinforced this tension. France strongly supported NATO's response, sending troops to Eastern Europe and supplying weapons to Ukraine. But at the same time, Macron renewed his calls for a stronger European defense pillar within NATO, one that could act autonomously if needed. France's message is clear. NATO is necessary today, but Europe must prepare for a future where America may not always be there. The bigger question, NATO or European army? This leaves us with a debate that goes beyond France. Should Europe rely on NATO, which is effectively guaranteed by American military power? Or should it invest in its own army, under EU leadership, free from US dominance? France stands firmly on the second option. But its partners are divided. Germany hesitates, Eastern Europe resists, and Britain, outside the EU, is skeptical. Still, France's voice continues to shape the conversation. Its vision of a Europe that defends itself may sound ambitious, but it reflects a long historical pattern. France never wanted to be a follower. Closing reflection. France's journey with NATO is unique. From hosting NATO headquarters, to expelling it in 1966, to rejoining in 2009, France has constantly balanced alliance and independence. Today, it remains a loyal NATO ally but also the loudest advocate for a European army. This duality defines French foreign policy, inside NATO, but not completely of NATO. So the question remains, was Charles de Gaulle right? Was France wise to resist full dependence on the US, preparing Europe for a more uncertain future? Or has this pursuit of independence only created friction, weakening Europe's unity at moments of crisis? What do you think? Should Europe follow France's path toward military autonomy, or should it stay under the American shield of NATO?